Hey everybody, Chris Lindsay here, and you're listening to Pitch List. We want to discover what makes creative people tick. Join us as we explore what it means to be a writer, and more importantly, what it means to be a person. Remember why you love music, and welcome to Pitch List. Hey everybody, Chris Lindsay here with another edition of Pitch List. I've been looking forward to my next guest's appearance for a long time. He is, in my humble opinion, one of the most talented people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He is a master guitar player, a top call session musician for his entire career. Check him out on AllMusic. His list of credits is insane. He is also arguably the most prolific and successful producer of the modern era of country music. He was gracious to give us some of his time while he was on vacation in Florida. Here's Dan Huff. Good morning. How are you, man?
Morning, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm really excited about today. I got ahead of myself there because I was too excited. Our guest today is the one and only, the man, Dan Huff. How are you, Dan?
I don't know if I can live up to that introduction, but I'm good. I'm doing really good. Thanks.
Oh yeah, you can. You can live up to more than that introduction. But anyway, hey, first of all, I want to say we were talking before the show. You agreed to be on, and you're actually on a little warm vacation spot. So thank you very much for taking your time when you're on vacation to do this for us.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. So I've got a huge, you and we've known each other for a long time. And I thought we've had a few writer type producers on our podcast, which is, mostly about songwriting, but we've never had a proper producer. And I was so glad to get somebody of your caliber on here. Most of our audience, I think, are songwriters. Some live in Nashville, some don't. And you're the kind of guy they want to hear from. You're the guy they want to talk to. And I'm sure you know that.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes, please talk. Yes.
Protocol. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if your listeners know that. I mean, probably because of you, Amy, and Marv, that's what got my career into production going. That was it. That was probably the single most influential moment and what am I thinking, about 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Is that what it was, you think? With the song Amazed. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this morning, knowing I was going to be chatting with you today. And I had no clue when I got into, I know this isn't your question, but I
love it. Go ahead.
And I was a studio guitar player, contented. And that's really what my life's dream was. That was my goal. And it was going along just nicely. And because of a real famous producer that took a liking to me, and he was the one who first said, you may have a producer's kind of mind and heart. Maybe you ought to give that a whirl. Fast forward, I started producing some acts, either no-name first-time acts, or Lone Star, who was kind of, it appeared that they were kind of on the chopping block at this point of their career. And so it wasn't a big stretch for the label to give kind of a no-name producer a shot at it. Enter that song that, we were just lucky enough to have not turned it down like so many other acts did. I'm sure most of them have hit themselves in the head several times, but just out of it was just kind of one of those gifts. And it it's like all of a sudden, I became a producer that was sought after because of apparent, and this is the wink, wink, and a nudge, nudge, and quotation marks around it, because of my brilliance on that. And the brilliance was basically, I didn't say no to a really good song. So thank you very much for that.
Well, that's sweet. But you know what? I feel like we have the exact same story, because
really?
Amy, Marv, and I were just, pretty new to town, trying to get something going. Nobody really, we weren't getting cuts. We weren't doing anything. And all of a sudden, Lone Star, a band I didn't know was cutting a song. I knew your name because I was writing for James Stroud at DreamWorks, and I think he used you to play guitar a lot. So I knew that name, and I had followed your guitar playing a little bit. But it was the same story for us, because when you cut that song on Lone Star, and it's an incredible record, and it's a great song too, but it's all that came together for everybody is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
we're in the same position as you. Without you cutting that song on them, I don't think any of us would have had a writing career that we've had at all.
It's that great mystery, and it's humbling and beautiful at the same time. I mean, it's like it's the world kind of in the music microcosm. If it's more than you at every given moment.
Yeah, it really is, and it is really so much out of our hands. Yeah. I think it's such a great lesson to try to learn, and it's easy to try to force things, but how many times, from a writer perspective, trying to get someone to cut a song or trying to engineering a cut, it never works. It always goes where it wants to go, not where you're trying to make it go.
Well, anyway, sorry for that detour, but I mean that, again, that's which is why I guess I'm a guest on your podcast now. So,
well, yes, because, and we have that shared history, and man, I thank the Lord for it often. I don't really think without that record you made, I would have the life that I have. I really mean that. It's just those crazy little things, but let's go back. I want to go back to the beginning, because you are a local Nashville guy. That's right. Mm-hmm. Brentwood Academy. That's a rare person, a local Nashville guy.
Yeah. With absolutely grew up with zero interest in country music, which is the kind of an irony that's never lost on me. I grew up with a lot of, my father was a musician, great musician. He was an orchestrator, but he was in predominantly contemporary Christian music, which was the forefront of that at that time. But I grew up with several guys, Gordon Kennedy, I grew up with Kennedy brothers. Their father was an institution in country music. Jerry Kennedy, guitar player turned record label executive producer and all that stuff. So I was always around it, but my interests were squarely in rock and pop music. So Nashville in my younger years was something I was going to leave as soon as I possibly could.
Yeah. I have teenage boys that are musicians. They have the same sentiment.
Yeah.
They appreciate it, but they don't want anything to do with it. It's crazy.
Well, especially if their old man is involved in it.
Right. Yeah. So you did move out to LA, right? And would you consider yourself when you were young like a heavy metal guy you're such a versatile player, but what was your first love on electric guitar? Was it metal or rock, or what would you call it?
No, I had a weird interest. Or a very specific interest, I should say. I was interested in being a session player. I mean, that was literally, I thought because I was introduced to it as a 13, 14-year-old guy. My dad would take me to sessions. I just thought that was the coolest thing that musicians, and I met some great guitar players at that time, Reggie Young being one of them, and who just were so kind to me and would show me what they did. And the thought that people could come in, sight unseen or unheard music and make something that was memorable really got into my skin. And so as a result, I just listened to everything, but more specifically style-wise, it was more what was happening in Los Angeles when I was a teenager in the 70s. So any and everything that some of the key players that I was interested in would be playing in. I loved rock music, but I didn't want to be a rock star. I was probably more intrigued by R&B music at that time. And so it all kind of pointed me that direction.
So you were always, that's interesting. I mean, and you became and are, well, you don't do it anymore, but if you did, you would be the top guy. You'd be the top call guy in the world, or one of them still. I mean, you're one of the most incredible electric players on the planet. So you've sort of been heading that way since you were a kid.
It's all I wanted to do. I mean, and I would take issue with a little thank you for that. I mean, I still end up playing on a lot of my records because it's easy just for me to fill in the gaps. Yeah. I use some great guitar players, but that's a real specific job, and it usually tends to be more, I'd be emeritus status, I'd still probably play on some things, but how music is, especially pop music, culturally driven by youth. And so, it's I thank my lucky stars all the time that I'm in the game these days. Because when I was a kid, playing sessions in LA when I was in my 20s, and I saw a guy that was 40 years old. I would ponder and think, how did that old man get in the room?
Right.
You know,
Right.
so it was just it's one of those things. And I mean, I'm way older than 40 years old. So, but thank you. And the session thing was it was just a gateway to see. I didn't realize at this time, but during those years, I got to work for some of the top producers in the world. It's specific kind of different genres from Quincy Jones to Arif Mardin, later on Mutt Lange, and people like that. And then across the board, it was like I was getting paid to go to school and to see how these people operated in those situations. Had no clue that I was ever going to aspire to be a producer. But I got to see these guys, the kind of leadership, management of people, which I think is a real essential. They knew how to communicate, and their knowledge of music. It was one of those things where, like I said, I got paid really well to sit there and learn without even knowing I was learning.
Wow! And so when you came back to Nashville from LA, and that's probably where I started hearing your name, you pretty quickly were doing session work in Nashville when you came back, right?
Yeah, almost. I mean, for a brief moment, we had a rock band. I got bored because I was just playing sessions, 3 and 4 a day. It ended up having a rock band for 2 seconds, kind of a late teenage, breakout.
Was that Giant?
Yeah, it was.
Giant?
And we got lo and behold, got signed, and we're at the very end of the 80s and kind of went down the trash chute when hair music, kind of went out. And so we ended up in Nashville with the idea of being closer to our families and raising our kids. And so when we landed here and the rug was pulled out from our feet as far as, I'm not going to be a rock star. So, which I was never going to be a rock star anyway. Looking back on it, it was like either move back to Los Angeles or maybe cash in on a little of that, I don't know what you call it. I mean, the fact that I played on a lot of hit records, and it was just the right time in Nashville. And you mentioned James Stroud earlier. He was at the pinnacle of his career at that point, and he decided that I had known James when I was a teenager. I actually played on a record with him. And he wanted that kind of infusion into his music. And so it just one of those things that happened. And all of a sudden I was playing on country records, and the same thing happened. I was learning at a higher rate than probably my output.
Well, and also you may have been bringing in some of these other influences into country, which is making it fresh, and why they probably like you. I thought for maybe me and Amy, Marv, there were a whole crew of people, Hillary, Brett, James, Troy. There were a crew of us that came in, songwriters, who did have kind of a non-traditional point of view musically, writing, and that sort of freshens the thing up, Yep.
Yeah. It was that growth spurt. There was a lot of money kind of coming into Nashville, especially in the country music, because of the 90s. And so it was game on. It felt like, any and everything. So it kind of felt, it was interesting. When I left Nashville in the early 80s, it still felt like it was a pretty closed club, which is all these things, go in these cycles, people kind of are precious with their turf, and you get it because these are lives, these are livelihoods and families. And in the 90s, when all the rules were broken, this thing was going as fast and as furiously as possible. It was like just the hunger for finding new, more new. And it grafted us all in at the same time, and how many labels were there? Something like 30, something like that.
It was crazy.
Yeah. So we could fail, and we could fail 700% of the time, and as long as 300% of the time we were hitting it. It's like baseball, I guess.
Yeah. And there were, this is probably not going to be right, but it seems like it, maybe 15 artists that were selling platinum,
Yeah.
Maybe more.
I think there were more at that point.
More. And I mean, think about that. There was I remember people selling, a certain artist sold like 700,000 units and got dropped. It wasn't enough.
Yeah. All of a sudden, if you had a gold record, which we all are very proud to get a gold record again these days, that was almost a sign of failure,
Right.
You only sold 500,000 copies.
Only sold 500. Are they going to let you make another record? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then the whole record budgets back then, I was telling somebody about that. think about what those record budgets back then in the 90s, to make the records, where they don't have I don't think they spend that anymore,
No, and I've had the same production assistant since I started, Mike Griffith.
Yeah, I know,
and he's
Mike.
kept me beautifully out of any of those discussions. So I really don't know what we spend on our records. I just know that I don't overspend, and it's great because I haven't had a checkbook since I was 20 years old. See if that gives you any indication.
We are on the same page. I don't need a checkbook. I'm not good with money. I'm terrible with money. Amy will tell you I'm terrible with money.
Are you in the studio right now? Is that what
I am in our studio? I'm in the back office.
I love
you've
that
been
studio.
Here. You got a whole Keith Urban record here.
Great memories of that place. Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching. Oh, thanks, man. Well, I know from the writer point of view. Well, there's something I want to ask you because this came up a couple mornings ago with a co-writer. Okay. The word on the street is that you prefer a demo that's pretty sparse. Is that true?
No.
Okay, great. We're already. That's great. Okay, tell me about it.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, the truth be told, and this is probably sacrilege in Nashville, but I really appreciate when artists come in with their songs, when the labels come in with their songs in hand. When I got into the production side of things, it was pretty much the producer would come in with the songs, hear the tunes, and this is what we're going to be doing. And it's not that I don't have opinions. I've been around music all my life, but I didn't like the control aspect of that. I hated pitch meetings with the publishing companies, especially when I first started producing, they would give me all the C drawer songs anyway. Right. And I'd been playing on hit records for years. It's like, I didn't understand the disconnect. It was like, basically, it would have been better if they just said, hey, look, you're a junior producer now, so you're going to have to earn your keep. I just couldn't figure out why they kept pitching me so many songs that were horrible. So maybe that was the development of not loving the pitch meeting. But there was something about, I like making records. I really love finding that collaboration with everybody, obviously from the artist, the musicians, engineers, and all that, and the record labels. Everybody has a stake in something. And I like kind of working in that soup. But I felt that the taking song pitch meetings was really tough because it took a lot of my time. And I always had really thin skin as far as I just, who might have judged somebody's song? It's like, because what somebody loves, another person hates. Yeah. I have my own, likes and dislikes. And so I would sit through all those pitch meetings, listening to songs from front to end, and I heard about all these other producers. They'd hear two lines, go pass next, and I couldn't do that. So anyway, as a result, I'm getting to the point of the question. The weird thing about it was that I don't mind demos that come in with just an acoustic guitar, a piano. I don't mind that at all because that gives us a chance to kind of start from something. But these guys that are making these demos these days, they're almost damn near finished records, and they're great. And at first, it was really unsettling to me, I should say, because it's like, you mean I got to beat this?
Right.
And the next question was, how can I beat this? And so I feel like it's raised my game a lot. I think I've learned a tremendous amount because of these demos, these guys that were called track guys. I mean, they're all producers. Everybody's a producer, and stuff was coming in like at 98%. Well, how am I going to earn my keep? I got to somehow. It's kind of like, I don't know if you're into football, but it's kind of like, to me, it's like red zone type stuff. Different procedure. So anyway, sorry about that. That was a real long-winded answer to your question.
No, that was a great answer. Love that answer. And I want to say, I know what you're saying about the demos and the amount of the tracks and everything, but to be honest, also, that last 2% is the hardest 2%.
Sometimes.
It really is. And, I talked to McBride about it, John, one time about gear, he's talking to me about this 251 that's worth 20 grand. And I'm like, I've got a copy of something. He's like, yeah, the 251's only 2% better, man. You know what I mean? And it's double the money. But it is that last 2%, man. I mean, that's the difference. And also the whole 30,000 foot thing of, it's not just the track, right? It's the everything. It's the vocal performance. It's country music. It's the vocals, the thing, you know, how getting your artist to sing great and all that stuff, you know.
The marriage of all those components tends to you know, it, yeah, that's it. I mean, and again, it's like, you know, I find myself at this point in my career still kind of with that RCA dog, you know, kind of quizzical look, you know. It's like, I don't know that I still understand it. You kind of go with your instincts and you kind of fiddle with stuff, you know, and when something kind of speaks to you, you kind of go, okay, well, that feels right. You know, will a lot of people like that? Well, hopefully, because that's what people pay me to articulate for them, you know? So, but it's talk about humbling, and because you just go, well, hell, I like that, you know?
Right.
Hopefully you like it. You know?
Right. Well, it's the same in writing. All you can really do is make a song like, yeah, I think that's pretty good. Like, I wouldn't change that. You know, if when the song goes by and you're kind of working through it and you're like, every time I've heard that line, I kind of go, I don't, so we'll fix it. But when you get it where you think it should be, that's it. That's all you can do. You know?
It really truly is. And that's where I think the beauty of this collaboration thing that we in Nashville, it still seems to be really on a high level where people play kind of well together in the proverbial sandbox. And we have this knowledge that we need each other on every level. I mean, you know, I so need an artist they don't have to co-produce with me, but I need them to be present, you know, and saying, I like this, I don't like this. And if they're young and sometimes they'll see maybe my years and pedigree and be maybe a little bit, you know, affected by that, right? I mean, some of them, they'll come in and they'll feel like they shouldn't say that much, and I'm just the opposite. They'll say everything. I don't care how you say it. Say whatever comes to your mind, because that's the only way that I can be better at what I do and help these songs, help your performance, help everybody's performance. By the same track, on the same thought, it's the musicians. You know, I know you are really close with all the musicians in town, and how much we rely on their instincts. And you know, it's this beautiful kind of, to use the key thing, it's all the soup. You know, it's like it never stops. And we all kind of lift each other up when we ding the bell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it takes all those elements. You've got to have the song, you've got to, but you also have to have an artist. You have to have an artist, you know, and then you have to have somebody like you. I love the football analogy. Producer is kind of like a coach, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and maybe sometimes coaches played football like you and they were a great quarterback themselves. But in that role, it's a good analogy, I think, of coach, because they're just kind of watching the whole thing go, you know?
Yeah. And sometimes the best thing you can do, and this is do very little. And getting back to your thing about, whether demos are fleshed out completely or not, you know, the ego in me wants to, for the wrong reason, improve on something so I can validate myself. Yeah, I've still got it, whatever it is or was.
Right.
But if I stand back a little bit and try to be an adult in the room, you know, it's like sometimes the very best thing that I can do is 2% and keep silent the rest. Because if something is really good, you got to let it be good.
Yeah.
You know, and so the coaching thing is sometimes you're in there and sometimes you say nothing and you allow this stuff to happen. I will say this: one of the greatest treasures I have in my life as a musician is I got to work with Quincy Jones some on a Michael Jackson record when I was mid-20s. You know,
crazy.
And yeah, it really was. And to see that musical mind, and I didn't have. You know, it wasn't framed in a way that I understood it as much then as I do now, because I just watched a Quincy Jones documentary a couple weeks ago. Had I known what a musical giant and I dare say genius at that point, because this guy was a musician's musician. He was so great as an arranger and composer, but the irony is that when I sat with him, he was not flaunting any of that stuff. He raised the bar, man. When he walked in, it was like, you better be on your A game. And it wasn't threatening. It was just like, this is the level of the room now.
Wow.
And that really sat with me. And I don't think I would have described it in my mid-20s like that. But that was surely what it was, So yeah, I mean, when you sit and you're lucky enough to have seen that a couple times, and I saw it, boy, Mutt Lange, my God, that guy could get music out of a rock in a garden, and when you see that enacted time after time, it really shows you where the bar can actually be, and you can't skate it, and sometimes, and the other one component about, I think, in production is not being afraid of when things aren't happening, not panicking, and as a player, I would see some producers panic and they would fold.
Oh yeah.
They would fold and lash out, whatever it was. It's always everybody else's fault. Sometimes you got to sit and stew in that stuff and realize it's your job to get everybody out of that place. Your job only, and can you take the heat? And that's, once you've seen it, you have to do it. So
yeah, you're the captain of the ship, and if it's about to go down, it's your fault. You got to get everybody out of there alive, even if it means we're all going to lunch,
Yeah. Yes. Any and every bit of that stuff. You're right.
Yeah. So you're talking about Quincy Jones. So he just, like, you're saying, like, he just walks in the room and it just sort of, the whole thing just sort of goes up, right? Everyone's
elevated. Yeah. Because it was Quincy Jones. So,
right.
That's just that. But beyond that, it was the charismatic nature of somebody like that, at least from my perspective, was that, yes, he set the bar, the expectations, because he called you. You're there for a reason.
Yep.
But he enabled you. He enabled you to bring whatever that thing that you were noted for, and that really has always stuck with me. He empowered you with that, and it wasn't like, impress me now. It was totally not that thing. Were you trying to impress him? Yes, you were. But he respected your musicianship. I was 25 years old. I mean, what did I know? But that wasn't the conversation. And that's really affected me throughout my life. And also, like, when you're in the midst of a session and of course, player coach here, I guess I've been in a situation where I was cast in the wrong position. And it is so demeaning because you're trying to pull something out that you're not that good at, so as a coach at that point, as a producer, I feel your job, it's not to coddle somebody, but it's to put it in perspective. Say, hey, look, I may have put you in the wrong position. Let's figure a way to kind of take you and rejigger kind of where you are, what you're going to give me for this situation. Don't feel badly. That's on me. You're we could go sports metaphors all day. That's what I do. But that, I think that's a real serious thing in any kind of collaboration, because the second somebody feels defensive, humiliated, they shut down, they don't give you what they're capable of giving you, right? So you got to figure a way to kind of tee into what they have. And that I experienced as a musician. So it was easy to kind of take that experience and kind of implement it in my productions.
And I think that's great advice for writers in a writing session. It's very similar. You can get in a writer session, where, the exact same scenario. And you can also get in a writer session where the collaborative process with someone great raises your game, right?
Yeah.
But you have to have faith in the process, and you have to be able to, like, if someone in the room's not in the right area, you've got to kind of move the chairs around a little bit and figure out, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And not everybody has to be the superstar at every moment. No. I mean, that is tough sometimes when everybody that you surround yourself are kind of alphas. And so you also have to learn kind of how to detect that. Number one, I think that's really important because that can be real destructive. You can't have too many alphas vying for that coveted spot of being kind of the hero in that moment. And
Right.
and so that's, again, all these things, they're just life lessons. It's not stuff that's so out of range, but that's, when people talk about the idea of what is production, any and all of that stuff is,
Right.
and
Well,
also
then,
going back to the thing you were saying a minute ago, when things are not happening, and to be able to say at the end of that moment, to go, well, this really sucks. What do we do about this now? That to me seems to be what really separates kind of the men from the boys at that point, because sometimes it does suck, and it's not anybody's fault. Nobody comes in trying to make something suck, but it just does. Worst thing to do is sit there and sit there and kind of gloss over that and go, this is fine. No, it's not. People are paying money for this, and let's put on our big boy, pants, and let's figure this thing out. We got enough brain power in these rooms and enough machines. We should be able to figure this thing out. But let's dissect what it is that's making this thing subpar at this point, and let's kind of refigure it out. Egos, God, you've been in the business long enough, it.
yeah.
First thing you got to do is look at yourself, because we all have pretty powerful egos when you think about it,
Sure. Thanks for listening, everybody. Pitch List will be right back. Sure. Absolutely.
I was thinking about, too, totally off subject, but is you and Amy right? I said, Sherry, and my wife and I, she's not into music at all, so it makes it easy. I can't imagine working with my wife from that standpoint. That'd be really tough.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that, and I think the only thing that's different for us is we were friends for probably 4 or 5 years working together before we were a couple.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And we were both with other people. So we kind of knew how to work together and then fell in love.
You guys are an anomaly, though.
I would agree.
And I will, and I will give, now here's the other thing, too. And I say that, Sherry and I have been together since we were 20. So we've been married a long time. And she's by trade a nurse, and that kind of person follows a different path, But she does come by the studio sometime, though, and for years, she'll make her remarks, and it used to be really, it would piss me off because not a musician, and she would say she would speak in generalities, but it was like, well, that's kind of boring there, isn't it? And I'm sitting there so deep in the weeds, and it is boring, and I'm dealing with some detail that probably it wouldn't communicate to 0.5% of the people that would be listening to this thing. And once I got over my humiliation that my wife, who isn't a musician, didn't go to school to be a musician, could identify something quicker than I could, it always helped. She should have some co-production, I should say.
Yeah. Well, and she's in that perfect position of not having, she has no dog in the hunt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's just walking by, and it's like, hey, there's an airplane crash in your backyard. Fuck, I didn't see that.
Yeah. How come you didn't see that, Dan?
Well, because I'm over here. You see, I'm over here in the other part of the yard. You see all this is screwed up down here? I've been digging on this for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I didn't see the plane crashed. It's so easy to it's all about details, isn't it, man? For me, the little production work I've done, but I think it's just like songwriting. It's details. It's like, how far under the microscope can you get it, and stand? For how long can you stand? Or actually, when you're good at it, I think you get to like to do it. How what's your resolution you're going to work at,
Yeah. Well, and zooming out is the key at that point, because, you may be, have you ever looked at a painting this close? You just
right.
And you're looking at pixels, Okay, right. Well, that's detail work, and you could justify that. But at a certain point, you're going to have to look at it like this,
Exactly.
And that's the deal. That's that took me a little longer to develop that one ability, but I'm learning to as I get older.
Well, you've got an amazing career, man. It's I don't know. I was thinking this morning, you've been on top of this thing for longer than I came here in 94, and I don't know if something in the 70s happened differently, but I can't, you've been on top of this game for longer than anyone I've known. You know, I don't know what the numbers are, but if you're not the man, you're damn close to being the man for country music production for all time, you know?
Well, it has been an extremely long haul, and it's it's great. I try not to think about it too much, only because
Yeah.
focus on the wrong things. You know, I mean, and I'll tell you what. I mean, fact is, I'm learning more now from the. You know, I do a lot of co-production nowadays. That was about I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, and I've told the story. I don't think I've told you, but I'll make it quick.
No, tell it.
I was really considering, you know, because in dog years, I mean, I'm ancient, you know, in the music business, and you know, I was considering kind of just pulling back, you know, maybe retiring, just stop it. Fair enough. But the reason I was doing that probably wasn't the right reason, and my wife kind of she knew that about me, and she said, "What's really bothering you, Dan? You don't seem like somebody, you know, you don't golf very well, so it's not like you're going to sit on a golf course, no?" And I said, "Truth is," I said, I said, you know, it's just change again, and it's tougher to keep up with. The pitches seem to be coming a little faster now. Those 89-mile-an-hour fastballs feel like 96 now, and true, gravity affects us all musically for sure, because you know we have our lens that we've looked through, and that's going to be shattered every 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you know.
Yep.
And she gave me the best advice. She just said, "Well, you know, do whatever you want to do, but," she said, "as long as you're still doing it, why don't you just..." Okay, and for a little bit of reference, this was at the beginning when, you know, making music on laptops really was starting to really affect everything, right? And my skill level was not like that of a lot of these guys that were half my age. It could just whisk around. I'm pretty good on Pro Tools.
You're a Pro Tools fiend.
Well,
come on, man.
But not what I was seeing, and it was.
I understand.
So all of a sudden, I'm sitting there trying to get new software and try to be this and that, and you know, truth being told, I'm sitting there going, well, you know, I'm at a C level here, if at the most in this one world. And so she kind of saw that. She said, you know what, maybe you're asking wrong questions. Maybe you just need to be the best at what you do at that point, and let some of that stuff, you know, learn it and digest it, but don't try to compete on that level. Fair enough. And that was right about the time I got a call from Thomas Rhett. And it was, you know, he called me up and said, "I'd like to talk to you about co-producing a record of mine."
Wow.
And he told me who he was working with Jesse Frazier, and I knew Jesse, and I loved what Jesse did. And I said, well, he came over to my house, and I said, "What do you want me in there for?" I said, "I'm hearing your music. It sounds freaking great. What do you want?" And he just said, "I just want what you do." And it was like, well, bing, bing, bing. There's my wife's words kind of hit me right in the face. And so Jesse's background, Jesse is he's a DJ before he's anything else, you know. And he was a publisher, and then all of a sudden a hit songwriter and a producer then. And great tracks, you know, he just wonderful stuff that I couldn't do. And it was basically Thomas just said, "Hey, just be there and just activate whatever is your views on this music, and just you guys kind of let it all kind of fuse together." Sure enough, boy, that was a real learning point in my career, and it's given me years and years after that. You know, I would have stopped. You know, or at least
that's so amazing that and then that just presented itself. And honestly, as I think about it, listening to your story, those guys on that project without you, that thing could have gone over in the weeds. You know what I mean? It could have, I know you're not, I'm just saying from me looking at that, they could have gone a little hard left on that. You know, it could be on the other fairway. I think having someone like you, maybe, I don't know what the chemistry is there, but I totally get it. to where it sort of gets
great
to where it can be what it is, but it's still going to work for Music Row and for country radio, and you know.
Well, you know, and again, it's just people. I mean, Jesse and I have become really good friends, and the way that we work together is it's, you know, we don't overlap that much, and by just personalities, we're not, you know, we're not controlling, you know, and so by nature, but we're both very competitive. I mean, that's not necessarily with each other. We're both competitive in nature. But somehow it's like I really enjoy what he does because it's like I didn't see that coming, and then vice versa. I can say it because he's told me it does the same thing back to him. So we rely on each other, and as a result of our diversity, man, it's like we're seeing stuff that people were not seeing happen. And so as a result, you know, and then Thomas was the beneficiary of that, you know, and he's extremely involved because he's, you know, he's a prolific songwriter. So that was something that kind of, boy, talk about re-educate someone like me, someone who's been in the game a long time. And all of a sudden you go, you know, music is, you still can have a part in this thing. You don't always have to be the dominant factor, but you can be really crucial. And like you're talking about writing rooms, it's so important because it's not always the young idea that's the best, or it's not always the old idea. It's that fusion, you know?
And for writers, I think for writers that have been here, like myself for a while, a pretty good run, 20 plus years, maybe you know, like you said, music is kind of a fad thing. It's kind of like fashion, and it has a youth element. Even country music has a youth element of where all these new ideas are coming in. And as you kind of been doing it a while, you may not be as up on the latest thing that just came through.
And it's a big table, you know. I mean, it's like, and in like what you said a minute ago, I don't know where that project would have gone, but you know, by the same token, if it had been just me, it wouldn't have been what it is. So it's always that, you know, and you find those kind of collaboration situations, you know. And there's been a couple other people that I've collaborated with just recently. The same, not everyone works out like that. It's, you know, there's some moving parts to kind of, you know, that have to kind of fit, right?
Yep.
But I find that scenario now helpful to everybody, and you know, and a lot of these artists that are coming in that are in their young 20s right now, they're wanting access to that period of music, you know, that I will say, I'm older than you, but that we experience from a different perspective, and that's where, you know, it's not that we're just historians, but we actually kind of touched that thing at that time. And I think that
I think, boy, you said that great. I'm going to go back and listen to that. They are interested in something that we experienced, right? That music at that time, not just as nostalgia, which you would do now, but like at the moment that it was happening, like the real relevance of it. Right. And I get a lot of young writers in now talking about 90s country. They love 90s country. That's been happening for a couple of years.
Man, it's coming in like that, in 80s rock, you know?
80s rock. Yep.
80s rock is influenced, and you know, and yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'm involved with a couple of artists now that are really channeling that. You know, they're making it their own. It's not, you know, it's not like they're doing covers, but they're accessing that because that meant something to them when they were growing up, you know. So
it's just what you said. It's not the same, but you can definitely root around in there and see the elements. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like it's very similar to a Joe Diffie record, or, you know, there are
Brooks
other
and Dunn.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's so, it's interesting how you said it. I loved how you said it, because their perspective on it is they're younger. So just how they experienced it, however they experienced it.
Yeah.
Our perspective is we were there, you know, we were watching this happen. Either I was watching it happen or participated in some of it.
A funny side note, I did a record last year with Brooks and Dunn. They did a record called Reboot.
Yes.
And they asked me to do it. And you know, it's like, I just love Brooks and Ronnie, and I never produced anything by them. But so I was late to come to the party, but it's like, it sounds like a lot of fun. How easy will this be, doing songs that were all number ones, you know?
Right.
Well, the funny thing about that, it was just so not that, because number one, they were brilliant idea. They wanted all these young artists to collaborate with them, and they were going to give them the reins. So the irony is that I think if Ronnie it was left to Ronnie would have blown the whole thing up, because he's done this music. It's like it's been done. It's like, let's reconfigure everything. Let's start here, and if this is what we did, we're going to go over here. And Kix is a little bit more moderate, but he was well open to that. But a lot of these young artists, and their whole thing was going to be really young artists, the ones that were kind of coming up, Luke and Kane Brown and all these guys that were coming on the scene. And it's funny because some of the young artists came in, and it was like they didn't want to shift too much away from that sacred music. And it was sacred to them. And, they look at me kind of like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm sitting there looking at Ronnie like, what are you doing? And it was really interesting because that was, and it actually turned out to be a really cool project. A lot of people re-enjoyed Brooks and Dunn through the eyes and imaginations of some of these artists.
That's fantastic. So they were like, hey, that's why we came to do this. It's just how it sounded.
Yeah. This is sacred music, and you can't change too much. We found some things that we were able to kind of have a nice smattering across the board. There was some stuff that we hung on to, like this is God's word right here, and there's some other things we kind of blew up, and it ended up being overall pretty nice project of songs that as far as the response to it was pretty wonderful. And had not this pandemic all of a sudden kind of been rained down upon us, Kix and Ronnie were going back on tour because people were rediscovering their music.
Wow. And their music is so fantastic. Ronnie Dann is one of the best country singers ever, man. Oh, unbelievable.
Well, and it's, and the funny thing is, it's like when you get kind of behind the scenes, you see where, again, that there's something with those two guys in a room together.
Yep.
There's a beautiful creative tension between both of them. I underestimated Kix, because I didn't know. And all of a sudden, when you're in there, of course, with Ronnie, it's just he opens his mouth and there it is. It's easy. Anybody can see that. But it was the beautiful kind of just that. I would call it a tension, not a bad tension, but a tension. And that seems to be kind of the ground floor of a lot of great music. When you see that tension enacted, it's, if everybody likes the same thing, there's, it's like, well, there's the decision. But when you got that one person going, oh no, not that great. And then you get a couple of people saying, well, what do you mean? I like it this way. You always end up with something better.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. And for them, I'm just speculating, but from watching from the outside, but they seem like two guys who really just had a perfect pairing. Like maybe they would not either one of them be recording artists on their own, but together they make this perfect unit that works, it's like they are necessary for each other.
Oh yeah. Well, they were both going to be single artists, but I think it was Tim Dubois put them together and just said, you're going to be better together. And boy, was he right, man. Jeez.
Yeah. I had just a question flash through my mind. How much of your work now are you doing traditional tracking sessions, like at Starstruck or Ocean Way, where you're going in with a full band and playing? Everything's like that now.
Yeah. Even on the stuff that's heavily track, produced, the demos, we always tend to go in with a live band, and at least that's why I guess these artists want me involved in that. They want some kind of humanity involved in it. Sometimes, sometimes it feels like we're finessing the demo a little bit, tending to that. And then sometimes, in the last couple of weeks, I've gone in without any tracks, just literally with a band. It was really
amazing.
Kind of fun and refreshing. Yeah. It was a good experience.
I pray that more of that starts happening. The tracks are great, and it's great. It's great to play on top of tracks. I've had some of the most magical things I've been a part of happen that way, like some basic tracks and guys jumping on top. But man, there is nothing like a full band getting a hold of a song with a singer in there, and just
I agree.
because the tracks just sort of, they're just like stakes, they sort of stake it to the ground somewhere. Might be a good place, but when you got a full band and a singer going on a great song, who knows what could happen? And even those tracks kind of hold it down,
Yeah. You always sacrifice something, but when if you're really going for big bottom end and the uber crack of the claps and the really fine tuned snares that are more hip hop in nature, you're going to lose some nuance. So to me, it's in a, you don't have to sacrifice it 100%, but you have to know what are you going in there for. And when you have just the band, you're able to default to a little more nuance because it's just human. It's just sounds. Right. You get your sounds, and I prefer, if I can, to do more of the post production with the add-ons, the loopage and all that kind of stuff. It's more fun to start the picture from that perspective for me, only because we've come out of the last like 6, 7, 8 years doing it the other way, and you see those changes. People, the one thing good about pop music is that people just want something different. So you got to be ready for the next phase. And like I said, there were 3 different artists I did in the last 2 weeks. We didn't have any tracks.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Mm-hmm. Well, right. Like you said, everything, as soon as you start doing something a lot, it'll burn out and something else will come through.
Yep.
I think I could ask you questions for about a week. You used to play, you did Mutt Lange sessions, right? Did you go over and play with him at the Castle and all those kind of gigs?
I would go over to England.
Okay.
And he had a place in Surrey that I would go over and do stuff. And it was it was funny because one time I was over there doing, I think it was a Michael Bolton record at that time. And he asked me, he said he fancied a singer in Nashville. Because he said he loved country music, and I said, "Wow, amazing." Shania Twain. I said, "Yeah, I've heard of some of her music." He said, "Well, I'm going to go over and do a record on her." And then he said, "I'm not going to call you though." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because you don't know anything about country music." Yeah, you're right. This is like whatever he did, and it was so funny because he started tracking, and he called me up, and I guess I wasn't working that day. He said, "Hey, can you come down and can you come down and have a play?" This was just very, I guess, South African. And I said, I thought you weren't going to call me for this record. He said, "Yeah." He said, "I wasn't." He said, "But I need your wrist for this rhythm that we're doing." And so the first song that I went in, I went over to Soundstage one day, and the first song I did was with him was "Any Man of Mine." And so all of a sudden I'm in. I'm in the country. So I played on all of her stuff. And those were fun records, man. And that's where the relationship really that's where he was the one who said, I think Faith Hill and her producer, legendary, Scott, they broke up and she's going to need a producer. Well, I played on her records and it was because of Mutt and Shania.
I never put that together.
But Mutt Lange gives you a recommendation. That's kind of something serious. So that happened,
So that's amazing. So that would be the first Shania record they cut here, right?
Yeah.
That you're talking about. And that's kind of when it was below the radar. A lot of people didn't really know that was going on, or most people didn't really know how important that would become,
I think, this is just speculation. I guess you'd have to ask him, but I think he thought he was going to probably make a little bit more traditional of a country record. And, he was a student of this stuff, so he knew what he was doing. But as they got into it, it's like, he wrote these riffs, Mm-hmm. And so there was something about a guy who came more from a rock perspective, kind of hanging some of that stuff or nailing some of that stuff down. And he found that beautiful kind of like Brent Mason played, like he and I would sit there and play together. And, Brent is the quintessential country guitar player. Nobody can do what he did. And so he found that same kind of thing that kind of Jesse Frazier and I kind of found in our production styles.
Right.
Two things that were not going to overlap. And he masterfully kind of melded that stuff together.
Wow, that is so amazing.
And he wrote all those songs too. So.
Yeah. And did you find the Mutt sessions where they rough? Were they hard? They're sort of legendary to be long and lots of repetition. Or
if you were a musician that was more about spontaneity, those would have been tough. I had played on a bunch of his sessions prior to that, so I kind of knew what was going on, and I got his vision. His records had this sound because he dealt with all those details, the rhythm, the way that you would lay behind the drums. You couldn't program that. Humans had to do that. So he had the patience, and he had such a silk touch. Never demeaned you, but it was like he knew what he was waiting for. And you may do an 8th note guitar part for 4 hours, 5 hours, which is that's mind numbing. But when you listen to it when it was done, it was like, that's what I like.
Yeah,
he had no problem with taking time to do it.
Well, once you get it right, I mean, it pays pretty good.
That's it.
I always say the same thing on songs. It's like, if we get this right and have a #1 record, it's probably okay if we spent 2 or 3 days on it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and he was notorious doing that with his songs too. As a songwriter, they'd find something and then they'd go, they finish the song and they realize that the pre-chorus was the best thing about it. So he'd take that out and write a whole new song around that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the deal. And that emanated into everything that he did. But, again, he was operating with it. I asked him one time, I said, what's the longest you've worked? Like, I can't remember if I was asking him time-wise in a day, but he took it to mean like without a break. And he said 2 years. He said, I took 2 days off in 2 years. And I said, what 2 days? He said, Christmas Day. Man, that's something else. I mean, but that was, and I could see that. And he would usually work 14-hour days every day.
Yeah, my one story, I had the guy named, I'm sure you remember him, Mike Shipley, engineer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I had him mix. I got to get him to mix something for me one time, and he worked with Mutt, and he gave me a Mutt story when they were tracking maybe the stuff that you were working on.
Yeah,
he said they would use some kind of drum machine to lay down the click track, right? So they laid the click track on tape, and then they brought out a guy with an oscilloscope, and they would correct the click for MIDI drift.
Yeah.
So the little maybe it was like the little rolling drum machine that, I don't know. Anyone, the Mutt didn't trust the drum machine to spit that click out properly because of some MIDI drift issue. We're talking like milliseconds, half of milliseconds. Yeah. And they would correct that click before you guys tracked on top of it. With the theory being that if this were a home and you were starting with the foundation, if it were a little bit crooked, it would get amplified by the time you get to the second floor, Yeah. I thought
very few people have that kind of dedication to that, that foundational structure. He just did. And, and I think Mike would have told you, and as the other engineers that work, everybody had to go and, pay for some psychotherapy because of it too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've heard those too.
And nowadays, I think we just kind of starting to come back to that idea that we have to be a little more irreverent about our choices, because right now we can get paralysis by too many options. Too many options.
Amen, brother. Well, man, I know your family is back, and you have been so gracious to give us your time on vacation. It's so great to talk to you, Dan. I could literally talk to you for 2 more hours. I know our listeners will feel the same. Thank you for being on Pitch List, man.
Oh, well, I'm honored. Thank you for calling me. Hi to Amy, and excited about that book. It's coming out, right? Or
it's coming out. We just shipped some advanced reader copies out today. I'm leaving here to go do it, so it's going to be soon. And I'll tell you that. Hey, maybe we can do a part 2 in a year or something. I'd love to do more with you, man. It's just such a great conversation.
Anytime.
Thank you, Dan.
All right.
Have a great trip. Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch List. To hear songs produced by or featuring Dan, check out this week's playlist by finding us on Spotify at Pitch List Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to us on iTunes or your preferred listening platform. And if you want, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and review. For more exclusive content from this week's guest and more, you can visit our website at pitchlistpodcast.com or follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.